introduce Dr. Charles McGraw Groh. He is an associate professor of history at the University of Tampa, and in my mind, more importantly, he is the historian in residence at the Henry B. Plant Museum located at the University of Tampa. He has been our guest curator for several exhibits. He's done original research and has an incredible focus on Tampa and community here. So it is my pleasure to introduce him. He's going to be talking about a new exhibit opening September 9th called Captain's Log, Voyages in the Age of Sleep.
Good morning, everybody. It is so nice to be here. I actually have been here before, but unfortunately my class schedule normally gets in the way. But I'm thrilled for this opportunity to talk to you about our upcoming exhibit. Hopefully, some of you know that the plant line, beginning with the SS Mascotte, was instrumental in the development of Tampa, starting in 1886 with linkages between Tampa, Key West, Havana, Cuba, and sometimes Kingston, Jamaica. Right? This was enormously successful for Henry Plant from the beginning, and it would do a tremendous amount to determine what was actually the shape of our community. So we have a new exhibit that explores this. It certainly talks about, the excitement, the adventure, the romance of steamship travel during this period. But I think much more importantly, it focuses on who we are and how we got here. Now, the title of my talk and the title of the exhibit references logbooks that were kept by Captain James Decker of the SS Mascotte in the 1890s. And I really love these documents for telling us something about where we came from. So I just wanted to share a couple of his quotes with you today, and then just tell you a little bit about the meaning behind those quotes. So let me start out. Captain's Log, July 27, 1893. And I'm going to apologize. Several times now I've said Captain's Log star date. So just, be prepared. Okay, Captain's Log, July 27, 1893. Weather from Havana to Key West fine with occasional rain from Key West to Port Tampa. Nothing unusual occurred. 5 Chinamen, passengers from Havana, detained at Port Tampa by collector of customs. Okay? Now, when I started researching this exhibit, what I did not expect to talk about was the Chinese Exclusion Act. Right? So, passed by Congress in 1882, this was the first immigration law in the United States to prevent people from coming on the basis of national origin. Okay? And it becomes significant to our story because there was a sizable Chinese population in Cuba at the time that Henry Plant began offering service between Havana and Tampa. Okay? So there was actually a sizable population in Louisiana as well because the abolition of slavery very late in both of these places had resulted in the importation of Chinese labor. Okay? So when he recognizes this as a normal occurrence, okay, that Chinese people are being detained, I think it's really important to help us understand the history of immigration, right? There's the people who would give shape to Tampa, and then the people who did not, right? Because that was determined at the beginning of our story. So our exhibit tends to focus more on something you obviously know, right? The Spanish-born, Cuban-born people who would transform Tampa from really a village of less than 800 people to a thriving industrial city based on tobacco with like 16,000 people just a couple of years later, right? So this is a very dramatic story, but one that very much, again, kind of depends on steamships. Now, I'm talking to you about captain's logs for a couple of minutes. I would also like to point out that if you really want to learn about immigration and also immigration restriction, there are actually passenger logs that are available from all of these ships for the entire time period under review. Now, I know for at least a few of you, this actually relates to your own family. The Plant Museum, in conjunction with the Florida Genealogical Society, is going to be having an event on October 21st to actually help people, right, kind of learn about how to use those kinds of sources. So please come to our website, come to the exhibit and get an exhibit companion, and you can find out more about that. Okay, let's do another one. Captain's Log, May 2nd, 1894. At 10:45 a.m., started towards Key West. Strong east-northeast wind, later part of the trip, heavy easterly sea. From Key West to Havana, strong northeast wind, rough sea. On arrival in Havana, took on 40 tons of coal, usual cargo of tobacco, fruits and vegetables for Key West and Tampa, and 1,700 pounds of pineapples. About 100 pounds had to go on the saloon deck. Now, I do think it's really important to remember, right, that the Mascotte is primarily responsible for the tobacco that propelled the development of the Tampa cigar industry. Okay? Now, the connection is so strong, as some of you may or may not know, that that's the reason why the SS Mascotte is the symbol of the city of Tampa, right? It's on the city seal, although now it looks like a sailing boat, so you don't actually recognize that it's the steamship, the SS Mascotte. Okay? But that is the connection. Tobacco is at the center of our development. Right? Now, I will also, my last plug, I promise. So the night before our opening, September 8th, we have a wonderful set of panelists. Jennifer Dietz, the city archivist, Holden Rasmussen, who is the historian over at Newman Cigar Factory, and Judge E.J. Salsinas, who are going to be coming together and talking about the history of the city's steel. So I think that's going to be a fun event. As I said, that's on September 8th. But just as important as tobacco, as you heard in that quote, is all of this other stuff, right, that's coming from Cuba in this period. And what's most important, I think, about what he's talking about is that the foodstuffs are going to be what actually provides the foundation for the development of businesses in Ybor City and West Tampa. Okay? So the kind of creation of community, right, requires more obviously than just tobacco. And so this, kind of constant movement of things from Cuba are part of that relationship. And I love the fact that he also talks about the fact that all of this cargo has kind of intruded into the passenger spaces. And when I've done oral history, the thing that's so interesting is that families in Tampa, when they remember the experience of their family in the steamships, they don't talk about the Mascotte, because the Mascotte was normally full of cargo. They talk about the Olivet, and they actually refer to the Olivet as the ferry, meaning they would save up money for second-class passage to go back and forth between Tampa and Havana. Okay? And that's the important thing here. We're not telling an immigration story, we're telling a migration story. Okay? People went back and forth constantly. They linked family, community in one place, family, community in another place, and they grew interdependently. Okay? And so what happens is that Tampa becomes just as much a part of Cuba as it is a part of Florida. And there are these shared institutions, right? Whether it's the social clubs, whether it's the union, which is actually an international union, it's not a U.S. union, that just continues to actually kind of integrate these two places with each other. So it's very much a fashioning of Tampa and Tampa's identity, which makes its experience very, very unique. Okay, I'll do one final one and then we'll stop. It's the one that gives the title for the talk today, Captain's Log, May 20th, 1894. No fire drill on account of the discovery of death in room 19 and cargo on deck. Then, of course, he talks about the weather, and then goes on to say that at 1:55, discovered among passengers a man and wife without a medical certificate before sailing from Havana, and understood that these two parties were returned to shore to avoid any misunderstanding with quarantine officials. Returned to Havana and landed them, no smuggled goods in the crew's quarters. Okay, now there's a lot here. I'm going to say something brief about it so we can open up for questions. The first thing, again, obviously you see that the ship is literally stuffed with cargo, but every voyage required searching the crew's quarters for smuggled items. Okay? Alcohol. They smuggled a lot of alcohol. Okay? But mostly it was tobacco products. And one of the things that you get a sense of really early is just how valuable this commodity has become for Tampa. really obsessed. You can actually see this in the city archives, with smuggling, imitations, all of the different kinds of ways in which, right, this trade can be undermined, to the extent that the most common reason why crew were discharged from the plant line was smuggling tobacco. Okay? So very much at the center of the story. Now, one of the other things that I think is so important to also kind of note here is the idea of quarantine. Okay? What the plant line did, which nobody actually kind of believed was going to happen, was safely bring people back and forth in the context of yellow fever. Okay? Now, at the time, remember, people didn't know where yellow fever came from, right? So it's not associated with mosquitoes, it's associated with ships, and specifically associated with ships from Cuba. Okay? So what the plant line did was to basically develop and adhere to a number of restrictions, which again weren't necessary because, again, this is not the cause of yellow fever, but that allowed people to actually believe that the travel was safe. Okay? And so therefore that's what actually leads to kind of a flourishing of our community, right? So it's really interesting to think about the way these environmental factors actually have an impact on our development. Now, what they did not do, of course, was make steamship travel completely safe, right? You know, you notice that account started with a death. And unfortunately, that's not the only one that I've come across in the logs. And so that's the other aspect of this. One of the things we talk about in the exhibit, which I'm not really going to talk about in this forum, is, you know, we do talk about, like, you know, the romance, right? The glamour of the heyday of steamship travel, particularly for those first-class passengers, right? That are doing this more as a kind of tourist phenomenon, right? But I think one of the things that's really clear in the logs is that no amount of money that they had protected them from horrible weather, tropical storms, disease, malfunctions, right? And all of the other things, of course, that were happening as a natural occurrence in the context of steamship travel, right? And so my last little teaser, I won't explain this story, but we actually have a connection in the exhibit, a very important connection between one of Henry Plant's ships and the rescue of the survivors of the Titanic, okay? And so I think very vividly kind of showing you, right, again, kind of the dangers, as well as, again, kind of the glamour that's associated with steamships. Okay, I'm going to stop talking, so hopefully we can have a conversation. Thank you so much.